I think the key point here is providing services with dignity, and that's often in primary healthcare, it often becomes a welfareist kind of an approach, that it's fine, as long as you're delivering services, it's okay, this is what they deserve. And delivering services with dignity is one of the key principles on which we work. Basic healthcare services was set up in 2012 with a vision of a responsive and effective healthcare ecosystem that's rooted in the community and where the most vulnerable communities can actively access high quality, low cost health services with dignity. Some of the key points here are healthcare ecosystem, because we believe that no one organization or an individual or a service can provide all the services that are required in a given area. And therefore, engaging the entire health ecosystem, which includes the different levels of healthcare as well as different kinds of providers. The second is that it has to be rooted in the community, and that's where I think primary healthcare can be delivered. It cannot be delivered at a secondary or a tertiary level, which is far away from where the communities live. And one of the basic principles of providing primary care is to be rooted within the communities where we serve. High quality, low cost with dignity I've already talked of. We work with an organization called Ajivika Bureau, which has been operating since 2005 in the similar areas. Which was set up to ensure secure and dignified lives of communities dependent on migration and labor. One of the phenomena that's increasingly happening in in rural India is a huge rural-urban migration. Very large number of people migrate from villages to cities in search of livelihoods. The land is not sufficient to survive. For most of the year, what you grow hardly suffices for 3 to 4 months. So there's a very large-scale migration, but often this migration is a single male migration, and it's a seasonal migration. So you migrate, you come back, you earn some money, and then you come back to the villages. It imposes a special vulnerabilities to this population, both for the families that are left behind and for people who migrate to uncharted territories of cities, which are often brutal. 81% of the population in Rajasthan is rural, which is true for most of North India. But as I said, that a lot of it is now it's a population in flux, though it's rural, but large number of men, especially from these families, would keep moving back and forth between cities and villages. The population in the villages is highly scattered, and therefore the primary health center, which is supposed to provide services for a population of around 20 to 30,000, often ends up being very far from where people live. It could be as much as 20 to 30 kilometers, and in absence of good roads and means of communication, it can become absolutely prohibitive for people to go and seek services from such far distances. The services often are incomplete, erratic, and unresponsive. For example, in a study done a couple of years ago, only 1 out of 8 PHCs ever treated a reproductive tract infection. They were not equipped to treat reproductive tract infection, and half of them did not even test for malaria in a high malaria zones. So this state of facilities of public services leads to a situation where a large amount of healthcare is sought by private informal providers who are there, who are unqualified, but they are at least present and they are responsive. There is a high dependence on doctors, and doctors are in short supply. I mean, we all keep talking about it in rural healthcare, how difficult it is to entice doctors to come and work in rural areas. And the reluctance leads to a situation where most primary health centers are unmanned and unsupervised and are invisible. 1/3 of primary health centers in Rajasthan do not have even a single doctor working there. So this is the only option. Families are left to fend for themselves. They seek care from whatever is possible, which often is in form of private informal provider. They are poor quality, they are high, they are expensive, but at least they are available and they are responsive. Healthcare, incidentally, is the single most important cause for indebtedness in rural Rajasthan. I mean, it's a study done several years ago by some researchers from, it needed somebody from Duke University to come and tell us that. In infant mortality at 52 per 1,000 live births is 5th highest among the 19 large states that we have. I think Raman did mention this quite eloquently, but I think it just needs to be reaffirmed that we keep talking of primary health care and it means different things to different people. It often means, and we've all gone through the era of selective primary health care versus comprehensive primary health care, and we keep emphasizing that it does not deal only with priority problems, and question is whose priority is it? Is it a person is not guided only by what public health importance is. If you need care for a certain thing, you need care for that. It may not be a public health issue. It may not cause death, for example, but so primary care does not deal only with priority problems. It deals with problems that families or individuals come with. Often it is meant to be a standalone health post or a community health worker. In India, for example, there is an obsession with ASHAs at the moment. You know, every 10 years we have a new obsession. ASHAs are community health volunteers who are supposed to be panacea for everything, because we often equate primary health care with a community health worker who would then deal with all the problems of the world. It's not about a standalone health post, it's an entire health system in itself, which includes a referral chain and people at different levels with the issues of supplies, of monitoring, etc. It's often thought that primary care is about first level curative care, but as Raman had so clearly shown, that it is not only about first level. What happens if the person requires the next level of care? Do you just leave the patient to fend for himself or herself? Or is there a responsibility of a primary healthcare system to ensure that it facilitates the secondary and tertiary care? And because of all of the above, the myth is that it can be provided by less skilled health workers. The doctors, the nurses, the community health workers who are less skilled should be doing primary health care, while the specialists and super specialists, those who are the brighter amongst with a halo around their head, need to work in hospitals. And while the truth is probably the reverse, because the kind of problems that you see, the social skills that you require, the community engagement that you require often requires a higher degree of intelligence as well as engagement with the subject. Where we work is in South Rajasthan, about 100 kilometers south of Udaipur city. They are quite remote. The population is scattered. As you can see, there are a few houses, a cluster of houses you may be able to see somewhere. Most of the population happens to be tribal in our areas, though we did not kind of go looking for such areas, but they were remote and rural areas, and therefore they were kind of more populated by tribals. At least 70% of households have at least one male migrant, because in areas like this, which is arid, there nothing much grows, there is very little water. Often men would, almost in distress, would migrate to cities to earn their livelihoods. They are too weak and too sick. Almost 1/3 families, when we started in that area, had experienced a child death in the past. And as you can see, the whole curve of, we did a community-based anthropometric studies to understand nutrition a bit better. And as you can see, the whole curve is shifted to the left. So it's not chance malnutrition here and there. The entire population is malnourished. We set up what we call as Amrit clinics about 3 years ago. The first clinic was set up about 3 years ago, realizing some of these problems. And one of the key problems being availability of physicians in rural areas. And so the clinic, as you see, runs in a community premises. It's kind of leased by the community, and it provides comprehensive primary care to a surrounding community. These communities are often isolated, so there would not be any nearby town or larger village. It's kind of an agglomeration of a few villages. It happened so that they turned out to be around 10 to 12,000, though there is no defined criteria, but because they are isolated, there is nothing for several kilometers on either sides. It's managed by 3 skilled primary care nurses and weekly visit by a primary care physician. There is a small user fee for clinical service. As you can see that the nurses here are the ones in charge, and the physician visits once a week and is available 24/7 over phone and for emergencies to manage. Clinical services include a daily OPD, which is run on all days by nurses except on one day when the physician is there, which tackles more complex problems. The dispensing of drugs, basic laboratory tests, contraceptives, and safe termination of pregnancy. Emergency and maternity services are available 24/7. So, for emergencies, we have tied up with hospitals in cities for referral services. Which I'll discuss that a bit later. It kind of becomes extremely critical to have such a system. It includes both emergency referrals and scheduled referrals, but they're often escorted. There is a small lab which uses a lot of point of care diagnostics and a simple pharmacy that we have around 230 odd drugs and supplies that one could dispense from there. It includes home-based care, especially for mothers and newborns in the postnatal period, patients with chronic illnesses and other high-risk patients. Outreach sessions include antenatal care, health education, weighing and counseling of children under 3s. So what we're talking of is more of a comprehensive care which includes clinical care, which includes outreach sessions, which includes home-based care, and it includes health literacy. So what are we doing a bit different? What are we trying to do a bit differently is that nurses are the prime care providers as opposed to physicians. There is a huge dependence on doctors, while a large amount of primary health care can be delivered by skilled nurses, provided they are skilled, supported and supervised. They're supported by a primary care physician on call 24/7 and once a week visit. They're aided by senior health workers, community volunteers and women's groups. So I think the key is not to rely on one or other, it's to optimize the skill mix. There is a use of technology which includes teleconsultation, sharing clinical information and access over WhatsApp at the moment. Because of 2G connectivity, there is very little that you can do beyond using WhatsApp and a telephonic consultation. Rapid diagnostics for prompt detection of illnesses, and an electronic MIS for efficient management and continuity of care. So the MIS captures the information longitudinally on every patient. So on every revisit, you can look at the patient, but all managed by nurses. As you can see, the nurse entering the data, and this is an X-ray transmitted over a WhatsApp for. There is a partnership, as I said, is a strong part of what we do, because no amount of primary healthcare system can work in isolation. As I said, health is a complex problem. There are several issues for which you do require referral, especially in a primary healthcare setting, and therefore we had kind of a social contract. So they are not kind of commercial contracts, they're social contracts but they are formal in nature, which says that if we refer a patient and we certify that the patient is poor, they'll be treated for free. So which has happened reasonably well, which has worked out reasonably well in our case. Management of emergencies, there are scheduled referrals and surgeries, there are labs and imaging. There are times when these hospitals have spent as much as upward of 200,000 Indian rupees for a surgery or for a prolonged management, and it has been done for free in our case. We have tied up with public health services for entitlements such as conditional cash transfer. So all the entitlements that are available in a public health facility, we try to engage with that, for example, free drugs for TB patients, vaccines and conditional cash transfers. And with community level institutions, so we do not start a clinic unless the community kind of gives the premises to us. And we engage the communities also for an oversight of the clinic. There is a advisory committee that looks at the functioning of the clinic every 3 months. In last 2 years, there have been more than 50. So currently, actually,
can you please conclude now?
Okay. So I'll just, I would not, the only thing I would want to say is that the range of things that you do, it includes safe deliveries, large number of tuberculosis patients, cataracts, leprosy patients, women provided ANC. So it only tells about the width of things that happen. The numbers are small because of the smaller areas, but it does, capture a width of things. But beyond numbers, I would just take a few minutes trying to say what accessible primary health care means and what it can do. For example, this woman, 28-year-old, lives across a pond. She presented with TB, right? I mean, in a hospital, she would have been treated for TB and sent back at the most. We found that the children were malnourished and also had tuberculosis. So they were then detected and managed. While on treatment, she developed Vivax malaria, and therefore, again, managed by nurses. There's no physician there. She then went on to have contraceptive needs, and that was again met by the clinic staff. So the continuity of care that is required can only be delivered if the services are primary in nature, they are at the community level. And any of this could have, could have just altered the course of her life. Any of these episodes could have altered. And if you focus only on one disease at a time, it would not, survive. This is a girl on whom a 5-year-old girl on whom a tractor was run over. She presented to a clinic. Of course, the nursing staff was there. They managed her for shock, put a, covered the wound using aseptic precaution, escorted the patient to the nearest hospital, got them operated, and then provided the follow-up care at the clinic level. This man was not walking for almost 10 years because he had an injury, and a spinal cord injury, and it had been bedridden since then. Simple physiotherapy and a simple walking aid made him walk almost after 10 years of being in the bed. So a simple thing as a walking aid could make a person walk, And this person, again, a migrant who had presented with tuberculosis, and because of that he had stopped working. He had no source of livelihood at that time, managed for tuberculosis. Mother was found to have tuberculosis, wife was pregnant, and she was provided antenatal care. the child subsequently was provided postnatal care, weighed and immunized, and he has kind of gone back and started working. So this is what I just highlighted some of these cases to say that what can primary health care of a simple nature can do. We've often been asked that is it sustainable? I mean, one thing I think we need to really make clear that primary health care for the poor cannot be financed out of their own pockets. If they could, there would have been some providers already. The reason that there are no providers and the health state is poor is because they cannot function. And one of the biggest responsibilities, of course, is with the governments to provide primary care. And one of the ways we are moving towards that is we've recently taken over a government primary health center to manage and use some of the experiences we had at the clinics. So this primary health center is entirely financed by the government and continues to provide free services to the patients. So if Sherlock Holmes was alive, he would have said it's elementary, Dr. Watson.